Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Taylor. This is a Getaboutable webinar, and welcome to you. We've got people from all over the world today, but we will start with our panelists that I've got for you today. So let's have a quick hello to Carolyn Childs. Hi, Carolyn. Matt Wong. You are allowed to say hello or something.
Oh,
you don't have to.
Kia ora, everyone. Hello.
Silence. Yeah, we're all
What
friends.
am I? Yes.
Yeah. And Gary Ellem. Good afternoon.
Good day. How you going?
Hi. And I just wanted to mention that we've got people here. I think I've closed it down, but we've got people registered from Malaysia, Canada, the UK, all sorts of places. East Timor as well, I think, was the one that caught my eye. It was interesting. So wherever you are and whatever time you're watching this, because I know that many of you will watch the recording, welcome to you. We're here today with these guys to discuss measuring, or the title, of course, is about measuring the impact of spend on accessibility and inclusivity. And I think what we've got for you is quite an interesting chat lined up. Let's just position this before we start. Getaboutable.com is our website. You can go and look there if you're not familiar with us, but hopefully you are. And what we're trying to do is we're leading up to a conference next year called AITCAP, and it's a accessible and inclusive tourism in the Asia Pacific. And we ran that last year, and that went very well. But we thought this year we would do a series of webinars on the lead up to that to get people to carry on talking about it, so it's not just a once-a-year event, but also to sort of flesh out some of the things that are on people's minds, so that when we do the real conference, it's well organized and we're on point with what's current. So this is the first one, and we're gonna find out more about these guys first of all. So Carolyn, I'll just start with you. So if let's assume that no one's ever heard of you, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Carolyn Childs. I'm the CEO of mytravelresearch.com, and I'm also a futurist and a strategist. My journey into accessibility, actually, like most people's, began with a personal journey, which is my father had an acquired disability, and I observed how tough that was for him, doing something that he loved, which was travel. And I dreamed of him coming to visit me in Sydney, but looked at the part of Sydney I lived in and thought it would be agony for him, literally agony. Not just that, but things like I live between two railway stations. One has 14 steps down, the other has 30 steps up, which on a hot day even I struggle with. And then we started to look at this in the context of the research that I do. And started to unlock some interesting insights. And then I was very lucky to be appointed in 2017 to conduct research for Tourism Research Australia, the governments of Victoria and Queensland, two of the states here in Australia, which really got under the skin of that. And I had the immense privilege of talking to people with a disability about what would make travel for them the joy it is for the rest of us, and how we could move the barriers that the rest of us sometimes put in the way of them having those great experiences.
Terrific. We don't need any other guests. That was good. That was wonderful. Thank you for outlining that to us. That's interesting. Now I want to start really the discussion with Matt and Gary. So Matt, I'll start with you. If you could just introduce yourself to everyone, and then I'm going to ask you about your journey through the last year or two. But first of all, nice to have you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's yeah, I assume no one knows me because I'm the only Kiwi on this call, I suspect. But my journey, I guess.
Sorry to hear that, and it's okay. We accept. We are. Yeah, we say we're inclusive. We accept everyone.
Except Kiwis. Yeah. So I started iFly 3 years ago for an American company called SkyVenture, and there's 87 odd tunnels around the world now. But iFly essentially is simulates skydiving freefall in a vertical wind tunnel. If anyone knows Queenstown, you probably haven't visited for the last 2 years, but we're just down from the gondola in the CBD. And I guess one of our taglines is we're for all ages and all abilities. And I've been in tourism in Queenstown for 20 odd years, working with agencies, activities, even wildlife parks. And this was the first one where it sort of had in the tagline, "We're for all abilities." And so that's sort of where my journey started 3 years ago, was just talking about if we're going to say it, we need to believe it. We need to actually put this into actions. And it's still in its infancy. And I think personally, I'm still on this journey of inclusive, accessible tourism. But it's really taken off for us in the last couple of years. And we can talk about this a little bit further on in the conversation. But it's been pretty exciting, even through COVID, and it's created quite a few opportunities for us. So we will talk more, I'm sure.
Terrific. Gary, lucky last. No one's heard of you. We're pretending, even if they do know you. Could you just outline who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's fantastic to be here. I'm actually probably usually keep a fairly low profile, so I don't think anyone would have heard of me, to be honest. 20 years running caravan parks. That's my background. I'm a bean counter by trade, so I'm an accountant. I apologise first off for that. Don't hold that against me.
I said we're inclusive.
Take them all. And my journey really started with, it's been nibbling at inclusiveness and accessible travel and accessible tourism for years and years, just minor improvements. And I actually had my my 80th birthday party a couple of years ago. And you're either thinking I look really good for 80 or I look really bad for 80. I'm not sure. So it was actually my wife's and mine 40th birthday, basically a couple of months. So we split the time, had our joint birthday party in between. And so I put my my grandparents up in one of the cabins of the caravan park that I stay at, that I look after. And watching my actual 80-year-old grandmother try and climb the stairs and just going, oh, I haven't done enough. This is honestly not enough. It's not good enough. What we have done for delivering accessible facilities for all and sundry. And that was really the start of it of, well, we've taken nibbles, we need to take a big bite and we really need to push forward. So that's really where, for me and for Lake Macquarie Parks, that's what's really got us going.
Mm. That sort of leads me nicely into the first part of what we were going to talk about. I'm going to go back to you, Gary, on this. So what happened? Tell us the rest.
It was a journey, and I think, Matt, you've hit the nail on the head. It's a continuing journey. I don't think we're ever going to get to an end point where we go, oh, we're done. It's a long process. So with the parks that I look after, it was around, okay, well, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Is there an off-the-shelf product? You know, why reinvent the wheel? And 20 years industry experience, I know a lot of what's out there, and I had a look at what new products are out there, and it missed the mark on what we were trying to achieve. You can grab an off the shelf, but it didn't really deliver that inclusive tourism for not just a wheelchair, for somebody who's got arthritis, for an athlete who's got a broken leg, for families with prams. There's this bigger spectrum. To get that across the board and get people on board with it, we did a couple of different things. So we actually chucked all our park managers in a wheelchair and gave them a bit of a tour around the caravan park. I tell you what, that's a challenging experience, but it is well worth it. That was an absolute eye-opener. So park managers who beforehand thought, oh, you know, we're doing the right thing to spend 20 minutes in a wheelchair, come back knackered, absolutely stuffed. It is so difficult. And to just go, oh my God, we've been missing it for years. We're nowhere near it, you know, and it gave them a real appreciation. So that was an easy sell from then on. If I spoke to my parks about, you know what, this is what we're going to do, or we're going to be doing more, or we need to, you know, really get down this track, 100% on board, because they had a real life appreciation for the difficulty. In terms of in council and getting it through the powers that be in council, that's a bit of a journey as well. And that was around telling them, look, here's the moral reasons why we need to do it. Here's the business case why we need to do it as well. And that was a bit of a sales pitch. And as Carolyn mentioned beforehand, like there's some handy research around from 2017, 2018. There's not a lot before that. And in terms of New South Wales, there's that much. It's basically non-existent. It's really difficult to find some business cases that you can hang your hat on and go, look, it will work. I know it will work. It's not just me saying it. There's others who can verify that. And that was like I say, that was a journey, and we got them through that. We got the accessibility inclusion panel on board, and we got the counsellors on board, and Madam Mayor and things like that. So they all got across the line. But it was really about having that sales pitch of, there's a problem. It's not an off-the-shelf product that's going to solve that for us. We need to really push ahead. And part of that was delving really deeply into it of not just, yes, it's going to cost more money, but there's a whole of life cost for it as well. And of the cabins we installed, across their whole life, they actually end up being $120,000 cheaper than a standard off-the-shelf cabin. So they cost us more up front, but by putting in stone bench tops, recycled plastic decking, being intelligent with our design and setbacks for western-facing windows, a whole host of things, your whole of life cost of the product actually is a lot less. So you could demonstrate, yeah, it costs us more up front. We're going to make a mozza out of them. It's the right thing to do. And it's going to cost us less over the life of the cabin. It just ticked all those boxes.
That's one of the themes of today. We've got Carolyn, the academic, who's done a lot of that research. Is it right to call you an academic, Carolyn? That's not.
I think any academic is probably having conniptions at the moment.
Sorry, yeah. Researcher then.
Researcher, yes.
Yeah, but okay. Well, you come on. Let's be honest. You have an academic mind, at least.
I have a mind that picks apart the theory of it. Yes.
But weighing that up again, with the research, but down to the real life, actual challenges that someone would have, like yourself, Gary, with that. Did you? We envisage, of course, that people will come along and think, well, where do I start? You became very passionate about this. Were you rejected internally before? Did you have to go through a lot of that to get to where you wanted to go? Gary?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were still talking to
Carolyn. No. I'm sorry. I'm back to you. Did you have a lot of walls that you had to push down to get these things done?
Yes, there are. Yeah. And it's because it's challenging the status quo, and it's trying to get people to think outside a smaller focus and try and think a bit broader across, we're not going to do the stock standard. We're not going to do what everyone else does. And there's a broader need for this. We need to take people's consideration, and we really need to push it. So we started looking at every element. So not just, okay, we can put a cabin there, but how do we get it so it's easier for someone to come into the caravan park? How do we improve the booking process? How do we get our staff more aware of inclusion? So they've all gone through inclusive training. As they arrive at the cabin, it's not just a car park, it's got to be large enough. We've got covered ramps. You get to the front door, okay? So if you've got a prime example, an elderly person who has arthritis, difficulty using a key, we've done away with that. It's about how do we change that, and that's an obstacle. How do we fix it? So, remote control glass sliding doors, or push button sensors. I don't know how much detail Richard's going to let me go into, but I can keep going.
No. Do you know what I'm doing? I'm just texting my wife to tell my children to be quiet.
Yeah, but the more elements that we went through, and I mentioned this to Richard beforehand. We actually did this project and went, okay, what's all the things and the things that we want to challenge, and basically prepared this massive list and gave it to the architect, who was really good, who was on board, understood what I was trying to achieve. Here's this massive list. Good luck to you. Go and fit that in a cabin that's going to fit in these square meters. And they were really good. They took on 100%. This is what I'm trying to achieve and where we were going with. So we've got some really nifty features in there. You need open space, but what I'm probably proudest about is like our kitchens. So our kitchens, which sound really boring, but it's a Ropox kitchen by Hayfel. So press a button, the kitchen benches come up and down. The kitchen cupboards come down and out so people can reach it if you're in a wheelchair. If you're a little bit shorter, it just makes it easier. So it's all these nifty little features. And our kitchens, like those Ropox kitchens, we were the first people to use them in a commercial environment. They've never been used in a commercial environment beforehand, and no one's gone down that track before. But we saw it as an opportunity. And I know that there's now other caravan parks that are going, you know what? That's not a bad idea, and not just for accessible tourism or accessible travel, not just for somebody in a wheelchair or somebody in a walker, but everyone can make that easier. If you've got little kids, you can get the little kids cooking with you. Like, that's a great family bonding experience. So if you can do simple things like that, it's about that universal design and it benefits everyone. That's really what we were trying to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And you take a lot of self-review at the same time while you're going through all this. And, you know, I don't have lived experience of disability, but I have a little bit of empathy, and I can understand that we haven't done enough. We need to do more. And so every time you turned around, it was about, well, what else can we do? What else can we do? Simple things like, why make somebody who is in a wheelchair go to the laundry block to do their washing and drying? Like, that's just silly. Just stick a machine in here. Just stick a washer dryer combo, you know, all these little simple things that they were an obstacle, but we went in with the mindset of a growth mindset. We're not there yet, but we can do more, and we can look more, and we can challenge more, and we can keep taking these steps, all little individual steps, but the result is a big step for us.
Tell me just briefly before we move on, what happened in regards to once you opened up the bookings that came through? Yeah, just quickly on that.
It's been great. It's been great for business. I'm not going to deny it, but it's even. I'll stick with the business, and I'll touch on some of the other positives that really come with it as well, that are probably worth more. But in terms of financial benefit for us, so we've actually got 4 cabins. One of them is a duplex, can be rented out as 2 one-bedroom cabins, or holus bolus for somebody who's traveling with a support person. Makes it easy to use. So those 5 cabins, we got open in September, and then we got shut down again at the end of June for COVID, as everyone knows. So it's been a bumpy ride. Now, what we found, bookings have been fantastic for them. We've got a longer, people book in advance for the facility. They stay longer, and we actually artificially lowered the price. We actually keep the price low because even though we could charge more for the quality of the cabin, that's not the sole purpose of it, is to make money. The sole purpose is to provide accommodation for somebody who may not have had that opportunity beforehand. But so from those cabins, we've made over that 9-month period, $215,000. Right? I'm not going to lie, they cost us a fair chunk of change. It cost us about 1.4 mil to throw them in and to get a lot of accessible improvements done in the parks at the same time. So we've made 215 grand back. So an average yield of 53 each of those cabins in 9 months. By comparison, the rest of my cabin stock in a full 12-month period, $42,000 yield. It speaks for itself. We're making extra money in less time, and we're doing the right thing for it.
If we've still got anyone left on the call who isn't rushing off to build some accessible cabins, we'll move on. But thank you. No, I wanted to take the time with that because it was just so interesting when I spoke to you about it. And I think that journey, that brings us full circle, doesn't it? But you do lose 5 points for mentioning COVID, just so you know.
Sorry, my shout when we catch up at the
pub. now, Matt, you're slightly different, aren't you? You didn't have that big outlay, you told me. Can you explain, and from a commercial perspective as well, what
we were already set up, I guess, and I guess what happened with us is the C word happened, and at that time we were looking for opportunities, and we're a small little tourism business in Queenstown, and just to paint a picture about what it's been like here in New Zealand, 80% of our business was international travellers prior to the C word. And then when the borders closed,
call it COVID instead of the C word, just saying.
I just don't want to lose any points. I'm just very conscious of that. I'd rather swear than lose points.
Kiwis are always so competitive, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we were left with 20% of our market. So we had to really think hard and strategic about what we were going to do. And what happened is we had to throw the rule back out. And that was sort of the first challenge, was actually ignore everything you'd learned over the last 20 years, throw it out the window and start again and think like an entrepreneur. And what I did, because we were a small to medium business, was look at all the big players in tourism and go, we're actually going to do everything opposite to you. We're going to retain our staff. We're going to look after people. We're going to put people first before money. And we're going to look for opportunities. And one of those opportunities was Jez Williams from Making Tracks here in New Zealand. And he's on a mission to have the inclusive movement happen here. And he wanted it to start in Queenstown. And we were members for a year. I guess anyone in business, you want to know that your money's going somewhere. So if I was going to pay subscriptions to making tracks, I wanted to know where that money was going. And it wasn't because I was thinking about cancelling it. I just genuinely wanted to know where it was going and what it meant. So I invited Jezza along for a meeting. That meeting lasted a whole day. He's quite a passionate chap, and we talk a lot, as you'll learn. And in that moment, I understood that there was an opportunity, a commercial opportunity. Now, as it's been highlighted since COVID, that tourism businesses need to have a social license. You need a conscience. But why can't you have that as well as a commercial focus and a commercial edge? So that's sort of where the story began for us. And Jezza said, hey, look, the Making Tracks movement is very much in its infancy here. I'm doing it on my own. I need some help. And we discussed all of the challenges he was having to get it started. And the RTOs weren't really talking. That's the regional tourism organisations here. And I said, right, I'm on a mission to help you. And so we did. And we got our staff involved, and it wasn't necessarily infrastructure. We were accessible. Our business is accessible. But what he led me to believe was you can be accessible, but that's different to being inclusive. And inclusive was more about educating people. I come from a background of I have no lived experience, right? And so whether that's a challenge or not, I'm not sure. But that's the position I came from. So I really needed to educate myself before I could actually educate my staff. And then it was about the collaboration. So we talk to people that come in with a physical disability, and we try and understand what they need. And they will tell us. They know their bodies better than we do. But it was just breaking that ice of actually just saying, how can we help? What do you need? And a lot of my staff, I talked to them today about it now, and they are more than comfortable with anyone that comes in with any sort of form of disability whatsoever. And that's really the biggest hurdle we had to face, was the people aspect, not the facilities, it was the people, and connecting those relationships and understanding how we had to be as an operation. And this is fundamentally where we're challenged right now as an industry, is owner-operators like myself, we don't have lived experiences, and it's not on our radar. But then, again, the commercial aspect kicks in again, and you start doing the numbers. Jezza told me 1 in 4 Kiwis suffers from some sort of mental or physical disability. And I do the numbers on that as a sales and marketing person. I go, hang on, that's 25% of my market I'm not talking to. That's nuts. There's a huge opportunity here. And so if no one else is doing it, that's what we did. We jumped into that market and we played where no one else was. And it's been absolutely phenomenal. I don't have cash measurements and results the way Gary does, but we're only 2 years into our journey of this. But what I do have is I have some amazing opportunities to do fantastic PR and exposure for a brand that's only 3 years old in this country. And I'll just give you one example. We had a chap named Jack Houghton, and he's now our ambassador. And he's in a wheelchair, broke his back on the ski field snowboarding. He is an adrenaline junkie. And he saw iFly. He actually got, unfortunately, turned away from a skydiving operation. And he found iFly, and he came into us, and we welcomed him with open arms. And he's now here every second day flying with us, so much so that he's now our ambassador. And he was brave enough for a 20-something-year-old chap to tell his story in front of a TV camera. And that TV camera ended up putting a great story on 7 Sharp, which is a current affairs program here in New Zealand. And the producer told me that marketing on its own, 3 minutes at prime time, was worth $35K. So I already know that I've got $35K worth of marketing, but I know there's well more than that, and we're probably talking double from the exposure. And you've got me standing here talking to you right now. This is just another prime example of when you do something positive, you do something that's right, you put people first, I guess, and it does have a commercial flow-on effect, and people want to work with you. And so I guess that's the message, is if you do the same as everyone else, you don't get hurt, you don't get to front these sorts of conversations. But these conversations lead to great connections and great networking opportunities.
Terrific. Thank you. Over to the not academic Carolyn Childs, if that's all right. That's all right, Carolyn. I
always have fraud syndrome when people say it, because I see myself as a researcher who rolls their sleeves up and gets their hands dirty with operators. So go on.
I'm just making fun of you. I'd like you to come back. I mean, I've got a couple of questions mostly directed at you coming up, but I'd like you to come back on what the guys have just been saying, because you spoke at AITCAP last year, kindly joined us and spoke about the size of the market and the potential out there based on your own research in 2018 that Gary himself referred to when he was doing his planning. But just to hear real world examples, what does that make you think when you hear this?
Well, there's probably one lesson to self, and I'm just going to kick that out of the way, because when we did the project in 2017, obviously we did primary research, we did qual and quant with people, but actually we also did a big desk research piece. And based on the bits that the paying clients didn't want to use, I was able to take away anything that was in the public domain and produce another 70-page report from that, aside from the ones that you can get from the Tourism Research Australia website. But what it says to me is we actually, if people are looking for data, we who are generating that need to help people understand how they can use the data that's out there. So for example, Visit Britain, and I see Chris Vetcher's on the call listening in, has a regular update of sizing the market in the UK. So they add the question periodically to their visitor survey. But the Open Doors Foundation in the US does this survey a maximum every couple of years. But one of the things I would say to people is, don't worry if the data is just about you, because one of the things we saw with the research about this topic is there's great global similarities. So what Visit Britain, Visit England, Chris Vetch, who worked with them saw in the UK is replicated in the US, it's replicated here in Australia. We don't know very much, I will be honest, about markets like Asia Pacific. Europe, ENAT, great amounts of information. What we actually have to do is, and this is a note I'm taking away from this, is go and talk to people about where that research is. But listening to what Gary and Matt said, to me, one of the things that when we're talking about there not being data, what they've both done, and I think the first starting point is that growth mindset that they've clearly both got, that commercial mindset to look at this, is they've created their own metrics here. Now, obviously, when you're starting out, that's difficult, and that's where all that published research can help you.
That's why we're getting those guys to do it all for us, and we're going to copy what they've done. And yes, carry on.
But if you look at, so the first thing Gary did is a benchmark that you can do, which is put your staff into that situation. Now, this is what the major car manufacturers do. They have their design engineers wear these heavy suits to see what it feels like to get into one of their cars if you're a 70-year-old. So get your staff to look at what you've already got and look at it through the eyes of somebody who is facing some of those challenges. So that's your starting point. Now, I reckon, Gary, if you put your staff back in those wheelchairs now, you'd be able to have a measurable sense of progress, and a measurable sense of progress that you can talk about. So that's kind of that first kind of measure of that. And then Gary also talked about that, we spent this much money, but that comparison between the standard cabins and these inclusive cabins, I think that's the message that's going to connect a lot of people to why the heck I should get into this market. I've spent 4 years going, oh my God, this is probably the biggest opportunity that anyone's going to get. Forget China, forget all these inbound markets. Here is a market that's on your doorstep. But Gary's lived experience demonstrates that with the data that he's seeing. So you can look at your own reservations data, your own data. And the other one that Matt's got in there, where he talks about that PR value of being able to talk about it. Remind me, Matt, on your website, you've got something that links to accessibility, and you can probably start to look at your website metrics to do that. So even if there isn't data once you start on your journey, one of the things I'd encourage people to think is you actually are sat on a mine of insight that you're already doing. And the other thing I'd like to pick out is the thing that Matt said about just bloody ask people. You know, people with a disability are used to being invisible. Incidentally, so are women over 50. I'm just going to put that out there. You know, often, not everyone, I'm going to be honest, there are people who are different about this, but often they're delighted to be asked because, as Matt said, they know their disability or the barriers that face them better than anyone else. And they're going to be there. So, you know, asking your customers, reporting updates to your customers, all of those things are things that you can do practically to see whether things are making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually, you brought me forward to a question I had for the audience, actually, which I'm going to ask now, and if you've got something you'd like to type in to the chat box, I'd be absolutely welcome. I should also mention that if that's difficult for you in any way, our email address is contact@getaboutable.com. And if you'd like to email us, we will definitely respond to that, and we'll ask the guys to respond via email as well. That's fine. Matt and Gary, do you any response to that? I'll start with you, Matt, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm touching on the last point of Carolyn, is you do just have to start somewhere. And for me, being private, it's having that hook of a commercial edge is where the starting point is, because there's so many operators that just think about the dollar signs or how much they're spending or how much they're going to make. If you start that way, it's always a challenge because you can always find some excuse why you're not going to spend the money. But in this environment, you just got to start. And I think that's extremely important and great to pick up on how you collect the data, because that's always a challenge for me. As an SME business, you run around and you're doing 100 things a day and you forget to collect the data. And then once you've collected the data, your question, is it the right data and are you actually reading it properly? But it's little metrics like we know Destination Queenstown here has just started on their inclusive tourism movement. They've now got a dedicated site or part of their website now that's inclusive. And of course, we showcase at the top of their website because we are the most inclusive operator in this town, bar none. And we've got great high definition content to go with it. So already we've got an edge, and we can measure the traffic through from our regional tourism organisation straight through to our business. So, it is the scenario of building the car as you drive it, but that's okay. We're in this mindset of startup and testing and validating, and failing is fine. Absolutely nothing wrong with failing. And this is the essence of what we need to be doing, I guess, in the COVID environment right now. But because of that, you're getting some fantastic growth opportunities that we didn't realize existed. I'll pass it on to Gary.
If I can just ask you though, a question I wasn't planning on asking, but with my experience in tourism, if someone is someone who could benefit from accessible and inclusive features comes to Queenstown and visits you, with other markets, you would, if you've got, for example, a kayaking center in the middle of nowhere, it is great for those places to have other places where people can go. So I'm not making much sense here. I know what I mean, but I'm trying to explain.
Collaboration, I guess.
Exactly, yes. So are there other, so I'm laughing, Carolyn. So are there other destinations there that you're working with and maybe encouraging to get involved in this sort of thing?
Well, from what I can tell, there is, but New Zealand is again quite in its infancy as far as I can tell. And that was the exciting part. I love doing new stuff, but if Queenstown can lead the way, then others will adopt it. And that's the key to it. And I think there is accessible and inclusive work being done, but just not focused on the tourism market or the tourism industry. And so we do hear about it, but it's not purely focused on the activity market, let's say. So what we're trying to achieve here is working with like-minded activity operators. And I think that is the key to it, is I think every activity operator has the ability to be fantastic at inclusive tourism. But I don't know if they all have the mindset or the growth mindset to do it. And especially in this environment, I mean, let's be honest, it's been bloody tough. And it still is, and it's going to get tougher potentially. So talking to them about growing into an area that they weren't even thinking about, wasn't even on their radar when they're trying to pay their rent, it can be challenging. So there are going to be some leaders, I guess, that need to step up, but they are the ones of the entrepreneurial type who are looking for those opportunities that when the market does come back and those planes start coming back to New Zealand, they are already ahead of the game. And that's the exciting part, I guess, for us is it is a competition still. We are still competing. We're in it to make money. Let's be honest. But we can have a social license at the same time, and I'm happy to share that knowledge. I think I jokingly said, coming on here, I'm thinking about, do I want to share some of these hidden gems? But then my social license kicks in and goes, yes, I do. It's for the greater good. That's quite important as well.
Gary, any comeback to some of the points that Carolyn made? Don't have to.
No, I'm trying to remember as much of this myself as I can for some takeaway points.
Yeah.
Look, I think probably one of the elements there that was just briefly touched on was the ancillary markets that you don't know that you're going to tap into. And I think that there's other businesses who will start to recognize that as well. And for us with caravan parks, respite organisations was one I hadn't even factored in to my numbers. So I thought, okay, we're going to attract, families and people who need it. And we got basically the door beaten down by local respite organisations who would book my cabin out every day. My cabin's out every day of the week if we would let them. Now, we've deliberately said, and it's a business decision to say, we'd love that. That's a lot of money. That would be fantastic. But no, our cabins right now are for as many people as we can get them out to, so as many people can use it and can help those other local tourism facilities that are also starting to say, well, how do we get in on that accessible market as well, and trying to find those elements. So if I had the cash, I'd put in another dozen cabins and I'd be speaking to the respite care organisations. But that was an untapped market that we hadn't even considered that came banging on the door saying, let us in. Here, when can we book? When can we come? Can we be there tomorrow? It's this massive market that you just don't see until you go and take that leap of faith and start going down that journey, and then it comes out of the woodwork. And the other thing I'd say is, and the accountant in me, it's all numbers and it's all measuring, and sorry, but the flip side of the coin is the good news stories you pick up of people traveling and staying in the parks. And it brings a tear to your eye of people who say, I've not been able to go for a holiday in 20 years, in 30 years. We've got grandparents bringing their grandkids saying, we've never been able to take them away and let their parents have a holiday, and we can take them here. And it's those things that you just go, that's why we do it. The money's, it's good for a business point of view, but that's the real essence of why we're doing it.
Okay, just a brief interlude. I just want to give a shout out to our team. Adrian, Julia, Manon, Yasmin, our founder, is on the call listening as well, and Debbie is here, I think, as well. And a lot of the work they do is fantastic. So I just want to just briefly mention them. I'd just like to read out some points from some of the people on the call. Chris Vetch says, great points being made here. This is rooted in an aim of delivering amazing experiences through great customer service. The essential focus for any business needing to understand the wider customer base out there. He also says there's a great case study potential. Actually, they're all from Chris. Chris is a lot of comments here. Chris,
come on the call.
Yeah, well, I can promote him to be a panelist, maybe. Yeah. But he's been making comments as people are saying things. But it's key not only think about the capital cost investment and ROI, but also the soft, intangible elements of service, training staff, empowering staff to make service adjustments, all part of the welcome. The other key elements are information and marketing to reach a wider audience. Many may make changes, but forget about the last element. Then another guy called Chris, who may or may not be this, I'm joking, says the service element is a key starting point for many SMEs. There won't be much cash around, but the cost to make service changes will be very small and can make a huge difference. Chris, you are welcome to make more comments, but so is everyone else. I should say it's not just a Chris show. Adrian asks, Gary, is Lake Mac considering using the cabin design as a prototype that can be used more widely?
if you want a copy of my plans, I'm happy to give them to you.
Well, there's an offer. And I was noting when you were talking just then, I think that Manon, if you're listening, we need to take a snip of that, and we need to reach the whole tourism industry with some of the things Gary was just saying about the, we've got to get this message out there. Anyway, I'm losing track of where I was going. So I wanted to just ask you guys, Matt and Gary, if more up to date or better analysis would have been out there or for you when you started what you were doing, what sort of thing do you think you could benefit from knowing when you started on this? What could you have pulled out for the people that you have to deal with and say, this is why? Is it what we're talking about today? Gary, sorry.
Yes, in essence, but I think having that demonstrable, this is what you're going to get out from a business point of view is worth its weight in gold. Now, whether that's you're going to a board of directors and saying, I want to spend a lot more cash, or whether that's going to the bank and saying, I need an overdraft to help me build my business, but that's black and white and irrefutable. It makes it easier to make that sales pitch. Beyond that, yeah, some intangible, soft rewards that you get out of it also would help that sales pitch, but that's not something you can really measure. That's a really difficult one. Carolyn, there's a challenge for you.
Well, there's actually one particular thing, and Matt touched on this with his staff, which is this is not unique to Australia and New Zealand. We in tourism are about to enter a global war for talent, and I touched on this in my AITCAP, which is the motivational effects of social license in recruiting staff, particularly. Now, I'm always a bit nervous about using the generational thing because, there are lots of things that are just as relevant whether you're 21 or 101. But we do know that Gen Z coming through, the kind of younger end of the millennial cohort, they are the first generation that is as motivated as much or more by purpose as by money. So in a war for talent, and bearing in mind that tourism is not the best payer in the world,
we're all aware of this.
that if you start factoring in those kind of costs into your plans, is definitely something that's there. And I actually feel, and you look at great experiences that deliver that intangible benefit, whether they're inclusive experiences or not, I will honestly say emotion is truly the most monetizable asset any tourism business can have, because that is the difference between what people will willingly pay more for, that magic moment. So, if you look at the moment, Gary, where you talked about that, you can lower the tables so your kids can participate. That's something that people will pay for. And there's a study that my old employer Kantar does called Brand Z, and they talk about the value of a brand and the attributes of a brand. And they've been demonstrating for like 20, 30 years, the premium that emotional connection to a business or a brand or a place has. Businesses who have that grow faster, are more profitable, have higher customer retention, have higher staff retention. And that's, again, where I think, as I said, the lesson for me is to keep putting that message out there about different ways to use data to pull those things together. And that's the message that you bring. I guess the other thing I'd probably say is, as human beings, we're quite binary, by which I mean we're either this or that. What both Gary and Matt's businesses clearly demonstrate is why choose. Great businesses do both. And that's where I think the opportunity is. And Matt, you talked about this idea of, whether every business is going to be ready for this. I haven't had a tourism business who sat there and said, oh, we've got enough customers and we're comfortable where the future is going. If you aren't comfortable where the future is going, you've got to change.
Yep.
And that's the problem is and I know all the emotional reasons, change is uncomfortable for humans at the best of times. And it's particularly uncomfortable for human beings when they've been through cataclysmic events. Like we hear words like, back to normal. Well, last year I looked at normal and we did a big review of this. Normal actually wasn't so great beforehand. I mean, normal in Queenstown had you trucking workers in from an hour and a half away because they had nowhere to stay because you had an accommodation affordability crisis or a housing affordability crisis. So there were lots of things about normal that weren't great before. This has created that opportunity for change. And why not go with the change where these opportunities are? You know, we talked about absence of research about accessible tourism, but as Matt said, the numbers that he looked at were just how much of the population falls into this category.
Very
And
crude.
but it's crude, but it's a damn big number. You know, when you start looking at that in advanced economies, with aging populations, 20 to 25% of the population is going to need inclusive experiences. Gary touched on families. You know, incidents. My former business partner, Bronwyn White, at one point, because her second pregnancy was twins, had 3 children under 2.
Mm.
I know. Everybody is sitting there going like this for her now. Incidence of twins has been going up. I think it's doubled since the 1980s. So if you're in the family market, every single one of the designs that Gary has talked about, I mean, I'm not sure whether you could take 2-year-olds into a skydiving experience, but every single one of the things that he's talked about is going to increase your attractiveness for that market. And that's the power of inclusiveness, is we've got to reframe our thinking, which is that big kind of initial step. But once you step over that, this is where the excitement is, and this is where that growth opportunity is. And I think, you know, what I would say to people if they're going, oh, it's too difficult, it's like, why is that more difficult than lying awake at night worrying where the money's going to come from and where the decent staff are going to come from? And that's where I feel. But I do feel I might pull together, I'm thinking I might pull together some of that thought about how emotion can be monetized. But I think you heard it actually from the horse's mouth, from the operators themselves, from Gary and Matt, around how motivating it is for their staff, how profitable it is to be doing that, and how good does it feel to be making 4 times as much money or 5 times as much money from an aha moment.
Can I ask you about the staff experience, Matt? Are they?
Yep.
Do they? How do I phrase this? Do they feel better about themselves? Are they about some of their experiences and the things that they're doing now, perhaps that they weren't thinking of a year or 2 ago?
Yeah, I'm like, so we launched 3 years ago. The first year was that forming, storming, norming, performing of a startup.
I'm sorry,
right?
what?
Forming, norming, performing.
Okay.
Forming, storming, norming, performing of a startup. And it's when you get into that mode, you're just hungry to learn. What it does is it just empowers them. And so all of a sudden, and there's this analogy where a manager pulls your staff up, but then eventually you want to sit underneath them and you want to lift them up and support them. And that's where we're at as a team. And when I can have my most junior instructor say, yeah, I'm comfortable taking anyone of any ability into this tunnel, and as long as I've got support from my senior leadership team, I'm good. You know, that is phenomenal. And we touched on, oh, there's so many things you touched on, and I was just nodding in agreement, now I've forgotten them all. But
there's a recording for you, don't worry.
Thank you.
And for everyone else on here.
Gen Y and some of the younger generations, the 20-year-olds, I've never managed 20-year-olds up until 3 years ago. And the first year was horrific, by the way. But the second and third year through crisis, they were absolutely amazing, as long as you provided what they needed. And we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a basic philosophy around what a human needs to grow and be good at what they are. And it's things like physiological needs and belonging, respect, all those sorts, and safety is a big one. You can provide some of the bottom layers, I guess, of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy. You've got them in your pocket. They'll do anything for you. And I hear all the time where they talk about their experience through COVID and how they were looked after and how they want to give back. They wouldn't leave. They love this place and all of the great things that they get to do. And inclusive tourism is just one of them. I just want to touch on clients. And I know we're focused on people with physical disabilities, right? But last week, I think it was about invisible disabilities. I'm not sure. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. And that got me really thinking, was actually it goes much, much wider than the market we are talking about here. So we're talking about the family, and again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but we're talking about families, friends, support people, the networks that they're working with. Now we're talking about people with, say, an anxiety, or we've got young kids that maybe lack a little bit of confidence and they don't want to go into our wind tunnel, and we're building confidence. But they now see someone like Jack, who's in a wheelchair, come into iFly, and he's probably one of our best flyers, regardless of whether he can use his legs or not. He's one of our best flyers, full stop. If they can see that, that gives the whole market confidence that they can take part in these activities, and there is absolutely no excuses. So it just spreads across the whole demographic. That's all I'll say.
That's terrific. Thank you. Gary, same question. We've only got 8 minutes, so a bit more brief maybe, but the staff, has it affected how they perform?
I love it.
Yeah.
It was challenging.
Thank you. Moving on. I'm joking.
No, definitely very challenging. And we've got some more little challenges for them in store. So like last time we put them in wheelchairs, the next obstacle is also around, okay, you might have a visual disability. So you're putting on some special glasses that change how you perceive things, to, again, get them to see it from a different point of view. They've gone through the inclusive training, but those good news stories, and when they see the benefit to the customers that come in and go, wow, this is awesome, they're not going to go anywhere. And they would work themselves to the bone because they love what they're doing, and they love that interaction and that positive news story, and that we're here for the right cause, and it's worth its weight in gold.
Thank you. The preaching to the choir comment that you made, Matt, that is a big thing of mine. So we have got supporters on this call. You guys, I would include in that, and we're running our AITCAP next year, and that's the sort of person would come along. But we need to reach the people who are you 5 years ago, for example, Matt, don't we?
Yeah.
And that's key. And that discussion about turning it into the real world is something I think we can build on. I've got some comments from people. Lalaine says, accessibility is for all, by all, of all. There is untapped market in accessible tourism, yet business world is still not aware. And I think Carolyn would be would agree with that. Manon says, our own Manon says, I agree 100% with all the positive impact. It's so important to hear. What has been the main risk to take the leap of faith moment for you, Gary and Matt, when we're talking about return on investment? Really brief answer on that. Could you say anything on that? What's been the question? What has been the main risk to take that leap of faith? Any risks?
I take risks every day. I bought a business in COVID, so I love risk. I actually really enjoy it. I hate standing still and not moving. So really, the only risk we had was that we might offend someone. Ooh. That's the biggest risk we had. And hey, if that's the biggest risk, it's not really a risk. That's a risk we can manage and deal with. Ooh. Financially. Hey, look, I of course I look at numbers. But I work those numbers really nicely, and I go, hang on a minute, if I spend $1,000 here, I can make $50,000 there. And Gary's probably in a great boat there as well to say the similar things. So there wasn't any risk.
Did you ever imagine, you didn't ever imagine that you'd be talking on a platform such as this one, did you, Matt, 5 years ago?
No. That's the thing is again, if you talk the right things and you start experimenting, you discover stuff, and then you start talking about it on things like LinkedIn, people want to work with you within business. They want to work with you. They want to hang out with you. They want to talk and learn from you. You all of a sudden become an expert. I am no expert. I steal all my ideas of great people, but that's okay. But what I do love doing is I love pushing forward. I like breaking molds, and I love throwing away ruled books.
We need to reach those people as well. Who have much earlier on in the journey.
Yeah, and I guess if I can influence, great.
Adrian says, I love your attitude, Matt. As the parent of a son with autism, sometimes all he needs is someone who is patient and supportive in order to step out and try something new.
Thank you.
I think that's a nice place to leave the end of those. Now, last question, just to Carolyn. Where do we go next in terms of creating metrics or research that can affect real change. And we want all the answers on that, please, Carolyn.
Well, I wouldn't say I have all the answers, but what I would say is that that starting point is there are answers out there. I mean, one thing that would be great is if all of you who are destinations out there, you know, ask your national tourism authorities, ask your statistical bodies to start measuring this. Tell them why you think this is important. For those people who've got it, you know, as I said, you've got countries like Visit England. If you're in the US, you've got the Open Doors Foundation. That research is out there. But as I said, I'd also reframe what you think research is and what you think research can do, to look and say, well, you know, can I use this research from somewhere else? Can I use metrics that I've got myself to look at this? So as I said, to me, if I look at what Gary did with his staff, or I look at what Matt did with, you know, non-tourism statistics to say how, you know, how big's the market, that's all research. And, you know, people do tend to have this thing that, you know, research is this big, you know, thing that just happens out there. All of you have got metrics that you can build and create for yourself, particularly early in the journey. So when you're creating your plans for this, build your success metrics in, work out what you can measure and do that, and see what you can use as proxies. You know, what's a good proxy? So again, Matt, with his, you know, 25% of the population of New Zealand has a disability. Look at, there's a, you know, I think we're really lucky in countries like Australia, New Zealand, the UK. We don't realize it. We have governments who collect reliable data. Can some of that data help your thinking to do things? And then that building of your own metrics. And then thinking about some of those other metrics, like, again, that coming back to just ask. Ask your customers, survey your customers, have something up on the website saying, have you noticed this? Follow them up. Observational research. So if you've made some small changes, try and note how many times I mean, this is obviously, again, easier with those visible disabilities than hidden disabilities. But similarly, make a note of one of the things I say, and it's not just for inclusive tourism, it's for, well, for any business opportunity. Make a note of the questions you get asked that you can't answer with your existing business, because that is a great opportunity. Now, I'm going to, if I've got time, I'll just share one personal story here.
Please do. I don't have a time now. Have you got to go anywhere? Have you got to go anywhere, Gary, Matt?
Well, I'm thinking about Matt because it's quite late.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a form of cancer that required 3 months chemotherapy. You could not tell looking at me, other than clearly chemotherapy is better for your body than too much good wine, because everyone told me how well I looked. But one problem I had was I could not drink anything that was cold. It would literally choke me. Do you know how bloody hard it is in Australia to get water at room temperature? So in one case, I went to our local cinema. My partner wanted a glass of wine. He said, what can you have? Because alcohol was not allowed. And I said, I'd like some sparkling mineral water, but tell them, can I have a bottle at room temperature? And he came back to me and said, they haven't got any. And I said, can you go back to him and point at that bottle that is on the display shelf, which is clearly not cold, and tell him why you want that bottle? So shame him into it. Say, my partner has chemotherapy and she will literally choke in your cinema bar if you give her cold water. Yeah. Now, I'm guessing both of you have food and beverage outlets, so you know what the profit margin is on fizzy water. Imagine if you sold one more bottle of fizzy water a day, the profit that would come to your business. So that's one thing I say to people. This is data that you have every single day. Keep a log of the questions you can't answer and look for patterns in them, because that will help you spot opportunities. To the question about how do we engage preaching beyond the choir, I think we have to create a secret opportunity event. So we don't tell people it should be accessible tourism. I'm going to suggest that maybe you put an invite out there and don't tell people what the conference is about, other than here is an opportunity for a market that is huge, fast growing, all those 6 things I talked about at AITCAP last year. Do you want to find out about that market? Then look people in the room, don't let them out till they've heard why they should care. And that's where I'd say then it becomes having people like, Matt and Gary tell that story, because operators listen to operators, which is, I think, the power of today. I can sit here and tease apart what they've talked about, but it's their lived experience of making money, of seeing staff retention, of seeing growth that makes that point better. So building case study libraries is one of them. But I'd actually just create a mystery around the opportunity and get people in.
That seems like a nice point to leave it at. I think that's terrific. I want to just say thank you so much to you guys for taking part with this. I know we've been a bit, organizing. It's been I only gave you the some of the heads up on some of the things today, but it's been very, very beneficial for me, and I hope for you guys on the call as well. Chris is back. He says, totally agree with Carolyn about the event idea. Great webinar. Huge thanks to the panel. Very, very informative and encouraging. And Manon says, thank you. There's a couple of thank yous coming through, but yes, let's leave it there. You're coming back. You don't know it yet, but we are going to get you back to talk more about this. I think we'll parade you around Australia and New Zealand, at least, talking about these things, because they're so important. Ian's here, says thank you as well. Ian Price, who I think you've met before. So let's leave it there. We'll speak again, but for one last time, thank you so much for joining, and also all you people who have your attendees as well. That's great. And if you're listening in the future, I hope this has been beneficial for you. Get in touch with us at contact@getaboutable.com if you have any questions that you'd like answered. So thanks, guys. You can say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Thanks all. See you soon. Bye.